Babylon stretched across the horizon like a golden beast, massive walls, hanging gardens, temples that pierced the sky. The greatest empire on earth. King Nebuchadnezzar ruled from his towering palace, surrounded by advisors, magicians, and armies that could crush nations. His word was law, his anger deadly. The city pulsed with power, wealth, and fear. Citizens bowed quickly when royalty passed. Merchants traded in whispers. Soldiers marched with cold precision. Everyone knew disobedience meant death. But within this empire of control, three young men lived differently: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Hebrew names given at birth, though Babylon had tried to rename them, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, erasing their identity, their God, their heritage. They'd been taken from Jerusalem as captives years ago, torn from their families, forced into royal training, expected to assimilate, to forget, to become Babylonian. But they refused. Not loudly, not rebelliously, quietly, consistently, faithfully. They worked in the king's administration, excelled in wisdom, earned respect. But they never compromised, never bowed to idols, never ate unclean food, never abandoned the God of their fathers. In a city built on power, they chose faithfulness. In a culture demanding conformity, they remained distinct. And soon, that faithfulness would be tested in fire, literally, because a decree was coming, an idol was being built, and a choice would have to be made. Daniel 3:1. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego lived in modest quarters near the palace. Every morning, they rose early, prayed, reminded each other who they were and whose they were. "We are not Babylonian," Shadrach would say quietly. "We belong to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No matter what they call us," Meshach added. "No matter how long we're here," Abednego finished. It was their rhythm, their anchor. The world around
Behold
them
the city,
worshipped a
brothers.
thousand
It
gods,
stirs with destiny.
statues
The
of
statue
gold,
watches
silver,
over us. We
stone,
must descend. Then let us
temples on
go.
every
The path
corner,
awaits.
incense burning
Stay
constantly,
vigilant.
prayers
Greatness
offered to
calls.
lifeless idols. But the three friends refused. They worshipped in secret, in their hearts, in their home. At work, they were exemplary. The king valued them, trusted them with responsibilities. They served with integrity, wisdom, excellence, but they drew lines, clear, unmoving lines. When royal feasts included meat sacrificed to idols, they ate vegetables. When ceremonies required bowing to false gods, they found ways to abstain. When colleagues mocked their god, they stayed silent but unmoved. People noticed. Some respected their conviction. Others resented it. "Who do they think they are?" advisors whispered. Different, self-righteous, dangerous. Jealousy simmered. Suspicion grew. Because in Babylon, being different was threatened. Faithfulness to another god felt like treason. And soon, that tension would explode. Because the king was about to make a demand that couldn't be quietly avoided. A public test, a visible choice, bow or burn, and everyone would be watching. Daniel 1:8-20. The construction took months. Workers labored day and night under the scorching sun, hammering, lifting, assembling, and slowly it rose, a statue, massive, towering, 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, covered entirely in gold. It gleamed in the sunlight, visible from miles away. The image of Nebuchadnezzar, or perhaps a god he claimed to represent. The distinction didn't matter. What mattered was the message: worship this, honor this, bow to this. The statue stood on the plain of Dura, just outside the city. A stage, a platform, a place where crowds could gather, where loyalty could be tested, where power could be displayed. Word spread quickly. The king has built an idol. What does it mean? We'll find out soon. Nebuchadnezzar stood before it, pleased, proud. This wasn't just art. It was control, a way to unify the empire under one symbol, one authority, his. He summoned his officials. Send word to every province. Every leader, governor, judge, and official must come to the dedication. The summons went out. Thousands gathered. Curiosity mixed with fear. Because when a king commands presence, refusal isn't an option. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego received the summons. Read it carefully. Looked at each other. "This is it," Meshach said quietly. "The test we've been dreading. Or the moment we've been preparing for," Abednego replied. Shadrach nodded. "Whatever happens, we stay faithful."
Hear
They
me,
didn't know
people
what
of
the
the
ceremony would
marketplace.
demand, but they
A light
suspected,
that will
and they steeled
banish the
themselves,
shadows and bring
because
forth a new
compromise
era.
wasn't an
Hear
option.
me, people of the
Not today,
marketplace.
not ever.
A light that will
Daniel
banish the
3:1-2.
shadows and bring
The
forth
plain
a
of
new
Dura
era.
filled with people, thousands, governors in fine robes, judges with scrolls, advisors whispering among themselves, soldiers lining the perimeter. Everyone stood facing the golden statue, waiting. Then the herald stepped forward. His voice boomed across the crowd. People of all nations and languages, listen, this is what King Nebuchadnezzar commands. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Silence, heavy, suffocating. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. No exceptions, no alternatives. Bow or burn. People exchanged nervous glances. Some looked at the furnace nearby, already lit, flames roaring, heat shimmering the air. It wasn't a threat,
we are
it
running
was a
out of time.
promise. The
What
musicians
choice do
took
we
their
have?
positions,
We
instruments
must
ready.
decide now.
Everyone knew what was coming. One song, one moment. One choice. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood among the crowd, felt the weight of 1,000 eyes, heard the whispers. What will they do? They don't bow to idols. They're gonna die. Fear tried to creep in. Logic screamed, just bow. It's just a gesture. God will understand. But deep in their spirits, they knew. This wasn't about a statue. It was about lordship, about who they served, about whether their faith was real or convenient. The music started. Horns, flutes, strings, beautiful, haunting, and across the plain, like a wave, every person dropped to their knees. Every person except three. Daniel 3:4-7. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood, alone, exposed, vulnerable. Around them, thousands knelt, faces pressed to the ground, worshiping the golden image, but the three friends remained upright, eyes forward, hearts pounding. They didn't make a scene, didn't shout or protest, just stood. Quietly, resolutely. It was the loudest silence in Babylon. People near them noticed immediately. Heads lifted slightly, eyes darted toward the three standing figures. Shock, fear, confusion. Are they insane? Do they not value their lives? The king will kill them. Advisors watching from the platform saw it too, and smiles crept across some faces. This was the opportunity they'd been waiting for, to remove these favored Hebrews, to prove their God was powerless, to secure their own positions. The music continued, the worship continued, but the tension was unbearable. Shadrach felt it, the stares, the danger, the cost. His mind raced. We could have stayed home, claimed sickness, avoided this, but avoidance wasn't faithfulness. Meshach's hands trembled slightly. Fear was real, human, present, but so was conviction, deeper, stronger. Abednego prayed silently, God, we're yours. Whatever happens, we're yours. They didn't know if God would save them, didn't have guarantees, didn't have a plan, just faith, raw, tested, unshakable. The music ended, the worship concluded, and slowly the crowd rose to their feet. Thousands turned and saw three men still standing. The verdict was clear, they defied the king, and everyone knew what came next. Daniel 3:8-12. The advisors moved quickly, eager, malicious. They rushed to King Nebuchadnezzar, bowing low, voices dripping with false concern. O king, live forever. You issued a decree that everyone must bow to the golden image when the music plays, and whoever doesn't bow will be thrown into the furnace. Yes, Nebuchadnezzar said, I did. Well, there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, men you appointed over the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. The words were carefully chosen, poisonous, Jews, not Babylonians, foreigners, men you appointed, making it personal, an insult, a betrayal. They pay no attention to you, framing it as disrespect, disobedience, rebellion. Nebuchadnezzar's face darkened, fury ignited. These were men he'd trusted, promoted, honored, and they'd embarrassed him publicly, refused his command, made him look weak? Bring them to me, he roared. Guards moved immediately, found Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego waiting. They didn't run, didn't hide, just stood calmly, ready. The guards grabbed them roughly. The king wants you now. Citizens watched as the three men were dragged through the streets. Some pitied them, others sneered, children stared, mothers pulled them close. Everyone knew these men were walking toward death. The blazing furnace awaited, and King Nebuchadnezzar's rage was legendary. No one survived it, no one, but the three friends walked with dignity, heads high, steps steady, because they'd already made their choice, and they wouldn't unmake it, not for the king, not for their lives, not for anything. Daniel 3:8-13. The throne room was suffocating. Nebuchadnezzar sat elevated, eyes blazing, jaw clenched. Advisors lined the walls, smug, satisfied, eager to watch judgment fall. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were shoved forward, forced to their knees, not in worship, in submission. The king stared at them. Men he'd once respected, now defiant. Is it true? His voice was low, dangerous. Do you refuse to serve my gods or worship the image I set up? Silence. The three men looked at each other, then at the king. It is true, Shadrach said simply. No excuses, no apologies, just truth. Nebuchadnezzar leaned forward. I will give you one more chance. When the music plays again, if you fall down and worship the image, good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. He paused, let the threat sink in, then delivered the final blow. Then what god will be able to rescue you from my hand? It was the ultimate challenge, the king positioning himself above all gods, above their god. The question hung heavy. What god will rescue you? The advisors smirked. The guards waited. The entire room held its breath. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego exchanged glances. No fear, no hesitation. Just quiet confidence. Abednego stepped forward slightly, spoke clearly, respectfully, but with unshakable conviction. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. The room stirred. Did he just? If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Daniel 3:14. Abednego continued, voice steady, eyes clear. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Silence, absolute, crushing. The words echoed through the throne room. Even if he does not. It wasn't defiance, it was faith. Pure, unconditional, total. They weren't bargaining with God, weren't demanding rescue, weren't saying we'll be faithful if you save us. They were saying we're faithful regardless. If God saves us, glory to him. If he doesn't, still glory to him. Either way, we will not bow. Nebuchadnezzar's face went from red to purple. Rage exploded. His features twisted with fury. How dare they? How dare they? Heat the furnace 7 times hotter than usual, he screamed. Servants scrambled. Soldiers moved. The furnace roared to life. Flames shot higher. Heat intensified. The air shimmered. Workers threw in more fuel. The fire became a roaring inferno, 7 times hotter than normal. Hot enough to kill instantly. Hot enough to incinerate anything within seconds. Tie them up, Nebuchadnezzar commanded. Throw them in fully clothed. Soldiers grabbed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, bound them with ropes, didn't even remove their robes, trousers, turbans, or other clothes. The king wanted them thrown in immediately, wanted them to suffer, wanted to prove his power, wanted their god to fail. The 3 men didn't resist, didn't fight, didn't beg, just stood bound, waiting, trusting. And as the soldiers dragged them toward the furnace, one thought filled their minds. Our God is able. But even if not, we're still his. Daniel 3:18-21. The furnace was a massive stone structure, opening like a gaping mouth, flames roaring from within. The heat was unbearable even from a distance. Soldiers approached, struggling against the intensity. They had to get close enough to throw the 3 men in. The king watched from a safe distance, arms crossed, face hard, waiting for the screams, for the bodies to be consumed, for his victory. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were dragged to the furnace edge. The heat was overwhelming, scorching their faces, but they didn't flinch. The soldiers grabbed them, lifted them. Ready? One shouted over the roar of flames. Now! They hurled the 3 men into the furnace, but something went horribly wrong. The heat was so intense, the flames so fierce, that the soldiers who threw them in were instantly killed. They didn't even have time to scream, just collapsed, dead, burned by the very furnace they were feeding. The 3 bound men fell into the flames, disappeared into the inferno. The crowd gasped, stepped back. The king leaned forward, satisfied. It was done. Justice, his version of it, had been served. No one could survive that. No god could save them from that. The furnace roared. Flames danced. Heat waves distorted the air. And for a moment, there was only fire, only death, only the sound of crackling wood and roaring heat. But then, something impossible happened, something that would change everything. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes widened. His mouth felt open. He stood abruptly. Wait, Daniel 3:3. Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? Nebuchadnezzar's voice shook. His advisors rushed to his side. Certainly, your majesty. Look, the king pointed, voice rising with disbelief and terror. I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Impossible. Everyone stared, squinted through the heat and flames, And there they were, 4 figures, walking, calmly, inside the blazing furnace, not burning, not screaming, not even struggling, walking, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their ropes burned off, free, unharmed, and a 4th figure beside them, glowing, radiant, not human, divine. The Son of God himself had entered the furnace. Jesus, in pre-incarnate form, walking with them, protecting them, surrounding them with presence. The flames couldn't touch them, the heat couldn't harm them, because greater than the fire was the one inside it with them. Nebuchadnezzar stumbled backward. What is this? Advisors were speechless, guards trembled, citizens who'd gathered fell to their knees in awe and terror. The 3 men walked through the flames as if strolling through a garden. No panic, no pain, just peace. The 4th figure stayed close, a protector, a companion, a presence that turned death into deliverance. The furnace that was meant to destroy them became the place where God's glory was revealed, where faith was vindicated, where the impossible became undeniable. And the king who thought he controlled life and death was about to learn. There is a God far greater than Babylon's power. Daniel 3:24-25. Nebuchadnezzar approached the furnace. As close as he dared, the heat still raged, the flames still roared, but inside, peace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out! Come here. His voice wasn't commanding now. It was pleading, awed, broken. The 3 men walked toward the opening, through the flames, stepped out onto solid ground. The crowd surged forward, gasped, stared. Not a hair on their heads was singed. Their robes weren't scorched. Their skin wasn't burned. They didn't even smell like smoke. The fire had touched nothing. Nothing except their chains. The satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors gathered around, examined them closely, touched their clothes, looked for burns, found none. How is this possible? What kind of power is this? Their God protected them. Nebuchadnezzar stared at them, overwhelmed, humbled, shaken to his core. These men had defied him, chosen their God over their lives, and their God had shown up, undeniably, publicly, powerfully. The 4th figure, the divine presence, was no longer visible. He'd served his purpose, walked with them through the fire, and when they emerged, his mission was complete. But his impact remained. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood before the king, alive, unharmed, vindicated. They didn't gloat, didn't boast, didn't say, "We told you so." Just stood, quiet, grateful, faithful. And the king who demanded their death was about to do something unprecedented, something that would change the spiritual atmosphere of an entire empire. Daniel 3:26-27. Nebuchadnezzar's voice rang out across the crowd, loud, clear, shaking with emotion. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. It wasn't just acknowledgement, it was worship, the most powerful man on earth, bowing verbally to the God of 3 Hebrew captives. He continued, voice firm with royal authority. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. Extreme? Yes, but Nebuchadnezzar had seen what no one could deny, a miracle, deliverance, power beyond comprehension. The advisors who'd accused the 3 men stood silent, pale, terrified. Their plan had backfired spectacularly. The crowd murmured in awe, fear, respect. The God of the Hebrews wasn't weak, wasn't distant, wasn't defeated. He was real, present, powerful. Nebuchadnezzar turned to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You will be promoted, given higher positions, more authority, honored throughout Babylon. From prisoners to promoted, from condemned to celebrated, from death sentence to honor. Not because they compromised, because they didn't. Not because they bowed, because they refused. Their faithfulness became their promotion, their courage, their reward. And the furnace that was meant to destroy them became the platform that elevated them. Daniel 3:28-30. News spread like wildfire. 3 men survived the furnace. The king's God couldn't kill them. A 4th figure walked with them. People gathered in marketplaces, homes, streets, talking, debating, wondering. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. It's a story, a legend. But too many had witnessed it. Soldiers, officials, citizens. Their testimonies matched. This wasn't myth. It was history. Jews throughout Babylon lifted their heads higher. Their God, forgotten by many, mocked by others, had proven himself, publicly, undeniably. Prayers increased. Worship resumed. Faith rekindled. Babylonians began asking questions. Who is this God? Why did he save them? What makes him different from our gods? Some sought out Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, asked to hear their story, wanted to understand this faith worth dying for. The three men didn't boast, didn't exaggerate, just told the truth. We serve the highest God, the creator of heaven and earth, and he is faithful. Their humility made the story more powerful. Their gratitude more compelling. They didn't claim special status, didn't say they were heroes, just faithful servants. In their new positions of authority, they led with integrity, showed mercy, practiced justice, honored God in everything. People watched, noticed. They're different. They don't abuse power. Their God really does matter to them. And slowly, quietly, influence spread. Not through force, through witness. Not through laws, through lives. The furnace had been meant to silence them. Instead, it amplified their testimony, and Babylon would never be the same. Daniel 3:28-30. Years later, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego sat together, older now, wiser, still faithful. They often reflected on that day, the furnace, the choice, the miracle. Do you remember the fear? Meshach asked quietly. Every second, Shadrach admitted. I remember thinking, this is it, we're going to die. But you weren't afraid of death, this Abednego said. No, Shadrach agreed. I was afraid of failing, of compromising, of letting God down. Me too, Meshach nodded. I was terrified I'd bow at the last second, that fear would win. But it didn't, Abednego said. No, it didn't. They sat in comfortable silence, remembering. When I fell into the fire, Shadrach said, I expected pain, expected death, but instead peace, overwhelming peace. The fourth man, Meshach whispered, he was there immediately, before we even hit the ground. I'll never forget his presence, Abednego said. Not just protection, companionship, like he wanted to be there, chose to be there. He walked with us, Shadrach said, didn't just watch from outside, he entered in. That's who our God is, Meshach said. He doesn't send help from a distance, he shows up, gets in the fire with us. They'd told this story hundreds of times, to children, to leaders, to skeptics, and it never got old. Because it wasn't about them, it was about God, his faithfulness, his presence, his power. Do you think we made the right choice? Abednego asked. Shadrach smiled. Look at where we are. Look at what God did. Look at how many lives were changed. Not just the right choice, Meshach said. The only choice, Daniel 3. The three friends understood something profound. The furnace wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Yes, it tested their faith, but it also revealed their God, not just to Babylon, to them. Before the furnace, Shadrach said, I believed God could save. After the furnace, Meshach continued, I knew he would walk through anything with us. That's the difference. Belief becomes knowing through fire. Faith becomes unshakable through testing. We could have avoided it, Abednego said. Stayed home, compromised, bowed quickly. Would we have regretted it? Shadrach asked. Silence. Then Meshach answered, every day, for the rest of our lives. Because some choices define you, some moments mark you, some tests reveal what you're made of. The promotion was nice, Abednego said, but honestly, I'd go through it again just for those moments in the fire. The others nodded. Walking with him, Shadrach said, feeling his presence that close, that real. It changed everything, Meshach agreed. Changed how I see trials, how I face fear, how I trust. They'd learned, God doesn't always remove the fire. Sometimes he walks through it with you. Doesn't always prevent the test. Sometimes he uses it to prove himself. Doesn't always stop persecution. Sometimes he shows up in it so powerfully that everyone watching must acknowledge him. The furnace that was meant to destroy their faith became the platform that displayed God's faithfulness. And they'd spend the rest of their lives telling people, when you're in the fire, look for the fourth man. He's already there, waiting, walking, protecting, proving that no flame can consume what God protects. Daniel 3. Their story spread beyond Babylon. Traders carried it to distant lands. Letters mentioned it. Songs were written about it. Have you heard about the three Hebrews? The ones who survived the furnace? Yes, their God walked with them in the flames. Generations later, Jewish children would be told, remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember that God is with you in the fire. Christian martyrs facing their own furnaces would whisper, if God saved them, he could save us. And if he doesn't, we're still his. The story became a cornerstone, a testimony, a reminder that faithfulness matters, that compromise costs, that God honors those who honor him. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego never wrote books, never built monuments, never sought fame. But their one choice, one moment of faithfulness, echoed through history. Because stories of God's faithfulness never die. They multiply, inspire, transform. Somewhere in Babylon, a young boy heard the story and thought, I want faith like that. Somewhere, a discouraged believer remembered it and stood firmer. Somewhere, a persecuted church recounted it and found courage. That's the power of faithfulness. It doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone who hears your story, everyone who watches your choices, everyone who needs to know God is real, God is present, God is faithful. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego proved it. In a furnace, in a foreign land, in front of a hostile king, they proved that no fire, literal or metaphorical, can destroy what God protects. And their story still whispers to us today. Stand firm, God is with you, even in the fire. Daniel 3, Hebrew. Nebuchadnezzar never forgot that day. Years later, facing his own humbling, he'd remember. The three men, the furnace, the fourth figure, it changed him, slowly, painfully, but it changed him. He wrote about it, sent letters throughout his kingdom. I saw the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prove himself, and no other God compares. It wasn't full conversion, not yet, but it was movement toward truth, toward humility, toward recognizing a power greater than his own. The three friends remained in positions of influence, but they never forgot their roots. Never forgot the shepherd boys, the captives, the forgotten exiles they'd once been. They used their authority to help the vulnerable, to speak for the voiceless, to show mercy, and always, always they pointed people to God. Don't worship us, they'd say when praised. We're just servants. Worship the one who saved us. That humility made their testimony more powerful. Because people saw it wasn't about them. It was about God. One evening, sitting on a rooftop, watching the sunset over Babylon, Shadrach said quietly, I miss Jerusalem. Me too, Meshach agreed. Every day, Abednego added. Do you think we'll ever go home? Shadrach asked. Silence. Then Meshach answered, maybe not to Jerusalem, but we'll go home, eventually. They all knew what he meant. This world wasn't their final destination. Babylon wasn't their end. One day, they'd stand before the God who'd walked with them through fire, and he'd say, well done, good and faithful servants. That hope sustained them. Through exile, through trials, through everything. Daniel 4:1-3. The three friends grew old. Gray hair, wrinkled faces, bodies slowing. But faith, still burning bright. They'd lived long lives, seen kingdoms rise and fall, watched empires change hands. But through it all, faithfulness. Young men would visit them. Tell us the story again. And they would, every time, with the same passion, the same conviction. We stood before the king, Shadrach would begin. Faced a choice, Meshach would continue. Bow or burn, Abednego would add. And then, with tears in their eyes, they'd describe the fourth man. The presence in the fire, the peace in chaos, the deliverance that defied logic. That's who God is, they'd conclude. He doesn't promise to remove every trial, but he promises to walk through it with you, and that's enough. Some young men would cry, others inspired, all would leave different. I want that kind of faith, one said. You can have it, Shadrach replied. It's not earned, it's trusted. Just believe God is who he says he is, and live accordingly. Simple, profound, life-changing. As death approached each of them, there was no fear,
My loyal
no
kings
regret,
and subjects,
no doubt, just peace.
we are
We're
united in
going
your
home,
service.
Meshach whispered on his deathbed. Finally. His friends, already past, were waiting. And the fourth man who'd walked through fire with them, he was waiting too. They'd lived faithfully, died peacefully, and left a legacy that would outlive empires. Because some stories don't end, they just keep inspiring, keep challenging, keep reminding us God is faithful, worth trusting, worth everything, even when it costs you everything. Hebrews 11-40. Centuries later, their story still resonates. In churches, in homes, in hearts facing their own fires. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When persecution comes, remember them. When pressure mounts to compromise, remember them. When standing for truth costs you, remember them. They didn't have guarantees, didn't know God would save them. They just knew, we will not bow. That conviction changed history, inspired generations, proved that faithfulness matters. Today, believers face different furnaces, not literal flames, but workplace pressure to compromise integrity, social pressure to deny faith, cultural pressure to conform, financial pressure to cut corners, and the question remains, will you bow or will you stand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego teach us standing is worth it, even when you stand alone, even when everyone else bows, even when the cost seems unbearable, because God is watching, God is present, God is faithful. Their story isn't just ancient history, it's a current reminder that your faithfulness today matters, that your choices today echo into eternity, that your stand today might inspire someone tomorrow. So when your furnace comes, and it will come, remember, 3 men, 1 fire, a God who never fails. And no, you're not alone. The 4th man is still walking with his people through flames, still protecting, still proving, still faithful, always. 1 Peter 4:12-13. The lesson is clear, eternal, unshakable. God honors those who honor him. Not always the way we expect, not always when we expect, but always. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't get rescued from the fire. They got rescued through it. That's the pattern. God doesn't always remove trials. He walks through them with you. Doesn't always prevent the furnace. He meets you inside it. Doesn't always stop persecution. He uses it to reveal his glory. The 3 friends went into the fire bound, came out free, went in condemned, came out honored, went in facing death, came out with promotion. The very thing meant to destroy them became the platform for their greatest testimony. That's how God works. He redeems, reverses, restores. What the enemy meant for evil, God uses for good. What was designed to silence you, God uses to amplify your voice. What was intended to destroy your faith, God uses to strengthen it. So don't fear the furnace. Don't run from the fire. Stand firm. Stay faithful. Trust the process. Because the same God who walked with 3 Hebrew men through Babylonian flames is still walking with his people today. Still protecting, still present, still proving. No fire can consume what God protects. No trial can destroy what God preserves. No enemy can defeat what God defends. 3 men, 1 fire, a God who never fails, and a story that will never stop inspiring.
Behold the city, brothers.
Faith is
it
worth
stirs
it.
with destiny.
Courage
The
is
statue
possible.
watches over
And
us.
God
We
is
must descend.
always,
And let us go.
always
The
faithful.
path awaits.
Romans
Stay
8:28.
vigilant.
2 Timothy
Greatness
1.
calls.